Good morning. So it's my job to waken you all up. I just heard that you've been on a Scottish night out. That's interesting, so maybe you will need woken up. Although I come from Scotland, you can tell that from my accent, I actually live in Brighton, which is as far away from Scotland as you can get without getting wet. I've been there for 30 years, my kids are English, but it's great to be back in Glasgow. I love this city, I really love this city, and hopefully you've managed to sample some of its delights. It's not so much a city. There's a famous writer called William McIlvenney who described Glasgow as not so much a city, but as a 24-hour cabaret. But you need to be here for a few days to experience those delights. Now, it's my job to waken you up, and I've got this a bit sort of bold title, really. Mind-blowing technology. You go, technology, is it really mind-blowing? And I'm going to show you something, and this is my sister. This happened a year ago, and it blew her mind, but let me show you what I mean. This should waken you up. Right. Now look up at the sky. Listen, Karen. Look around you. Look right behind you. Right behind you. Way around, further around. That's it. We wave. You can look around. Right, she thinks there are people waving at her behind her. There's nobody there in reality. Are you ready? Are you ready? Have a wee look. Now she's falling. Okay, now, she had never tried this before, and I had the same experience, and I have one of these with me today, okay? I have one of these sort of GIMP mask type things, and I will be out here in the foyer. My flight's at 6 o'clock, and if anybody wants to try this might scare you off a little bit, then just join me, join the queue, and we'll give you a go. But my point here isn't necessarily that this will change your world, but my point today is that consumer technology is something you have no choice about in terms of your sector, higher education. Because every one of your students, every damn last student you deal with is on Facebook. There were 1 billion people on one day alone this month on Facebook. It actually has 1.5 billion people, and almost every learner on the planet uses it. You have no choice. Resistance is absolutely futile here because they will use it, they will continue to use it, and it's irreversible. Okay? Now, the great thing about your sector, people in the private sector would be jealous of this sort of growth. This huge, massive, scaled growth in the number of students since the time I went to university here in Edinburgh in the 70s, it's absolutely ballooned. But growth brings growth problems. It brings serious problems. Some of those problems governments are struggling to deal with. The US debt, student debt, which is largely federal debt now, it's been placed back in the hands of government, is $1.2 trillion. To put this in perspective, if any of you are here from Africa, I do a lot of work in Africa, that is the GDP of Africa's 3 richest countries, South Africa, Ethiopia, and Nigeria. That figure is greater than the GDP of those 3 countries. This is an enormous sum of money. The default rate is rising. Similar things are happening in the UK. The default rate on student loans was at 30. It's shooting up towards 40, 45, 50%. In the end, somebody pays. And my contention here is that we must, it's a moral imperative, if we are going to take higher education, especially into developing countries in Africa, where a tiny, tiny portion of people even have a chance of thinking about higher education. If we export this expensive model to those areas, we'll fail. I don't think this is a problem just for the developing world. Across Southern Europe, we have massive youth unemployment. I'm just back from Greece. Massive graduate unemployment. This is true in Portugal, Spain, to a degree, Italy. This is a problem for us here in this continent. Graduate unemployment is becoming a serious issue in Southern Europe. In South Africa, we have 377,000 graduates, unemployed graduates, and 477,000 vacancies. There is a bit of a crisis of relevance in terms of output. But what I want to talk about today is something that you maybe want to focus on, because it's pointless using this stuff if it's not sustainable. Innovation is only innovation if it's sustainable. So as an investor, I will only invest in things if I think it's got a life, if it's got legs. Now, the thing you just saw seems bizarre, but I would put money into that, because Facebook bought it for $2.3 billion, and every time I put it on somebody's head, they freak out. Have you ever seen a learner react as positively to that as a learning experience? I taught maths. I've never seen a learner react even to a tenth of that degree. I have seen hundreds, if not thousands, of lectures, people sitting in lectures absolutely bored out their skulls. And if you haven't had that experience if you went to university, then I don't know what university you went to. You've been lucky. Let's not pretend that everything is right in teaching in higher education. Okay, so the first thing we want to pay attention to here in terms of mind-blowing technology is stuff that's almost invisible, but it is still mind-blowing. That's consumer technology. I would say, and this is a bold statement, that there's been more pedagogic change in the last 20 years when we started to use the internet with anger than there has been in the last 2,000 years. My kid at Maastricht University attends lectures in Holland. They're exactly the same as the lectures people attended in Plato's Academy 2,500 years in Athens. Not much change in many ways. These are the technologies that almost everybody in this room has and will use. Don't imagine that your students are not using Wikipedia. The stats are really clear on this. Almost every one of them does. It's absolutely absurd that education institutions should say you shouldn't use Wikipedia. What sort of educator would turn around to a learner and say, let's not use the most amazing knowledge base in the history of our species? That's happening. There are some British schools that ban Wikipedia, block it on their website. It's bizarre. Google, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. YouTube is actually a learning platform. The second biggest search engine on the planet. If you want to do something in your home, change a washer and a tap, whatever, where do you go? You go to YouTube. If you've been involved in IT training, I was a coder originally, where do you go and learn little tricks in coding? You go to YouTube. This is a major learning platform, and it's free. But there's something very special happened here. This is all invisible, you use it all in learning terms, and that's the humble hyperlink. Because when you use social media or you use Wikipedia, you're clicking through content. Why does this matter compared to traditional linear media, linear academic papers, linear textbooks, linear lectures? Well, our brains don't record. Memory doesn't record things like a videotape recorder. We don't store things alphabetically like an old encyclopedia. We don't store things hierarchically like a card system. Our brains are networks. And all those things I showed you in the previous slide are networks. That's why billions of people like it. Why do billions of people like Twitter? Because the brains that we have in our heads like short stuff. The one great lesson from the psychology of learning is that less is more. To sit for an hour in a lecture room with somebody teaching, I experienced this, maths and physics, with your back to the audience for 50 minutes, is not only foolish, it's morally bankrupt. I don't know what we think we're playing at when we take that approach to the human brain. The YouTube thing is different, that is linear. But a great lesson here that came out of MOOC land as well, when you actually look at learners using video, you record lectures. A good lecture is a good lecture. Sometimes a recorded lecture is better than a good lecture because kids are smart. They don't watch the whole thing. They miss out the crappy jokes at the beginning, the bits they don't need, the sort of padding out. If you've ever lectured, you know you'll pad out to the 1 hour. Why do we have 1 hour lectures? Because the Babylonians had a base 60 number system. It's got nothing to do with the psychology of learning. Absolutely nothing. It's merely for the convenience of timetabling. And now that we don't have to do that, it's time to move on. Now, the second big thing, which I personally have invested in, and I would say keep an eye on this, is artificial intelligence. 2 letters, AI, because this is coming at your world fast. It's already in your world. The first thing is Google, of course. Google is nothing but a bunch of algorithms. There isn't a person in this room who hasn't used Google, and that's all you're using, AI. So don't imagine it's not part of your world. You're right in the middle of this already. The great thing about AI now, we've had 2,500 years of mathematics from Euclid onward looking at algorithmic power. Why is it suddenly happening right now today? You know, we had Bernoulli, we had all those probability theorists, all that maths. Why now? Well, it's a very simple answer, and that is the internet. If you imagine algorithms as a sort of rocket of sorts solving problems, then the fuel, the data, is on a massive scale from the internet, which is why it has great possibilities in education. We've always been stuck in our institutions dealing with very small amounts of data. There's hardly any big data in education. If you go along a big data conference in education, it should be called small data in reality, compared to what Google do. Now, artificial intelligence isn't about, there's a series running on the BBC this week, it is absolutely not about trying to replicate or mimic the human brain. People who work in AI will say that's not what we're doing. Actually, if you look at what happened with flight, all of you who flew to this conference today, you flew in an airplane, not an airplane that mimicked how birds flew, but a completely different bit of technology. Human ingenuity designed a piece of technology that allowed us to fly longer distances safely and in some comfort. We didn't do that by mimicking what birds do, and artificial intelligence does not just mimic what the human brain does. And even further than Google, if you use Amazon, about 2/3 of their sales come from those little clever things they know about you, what books you didn't buy last time. Have you thought about buying this other book, which you usually end up doing? These things are smart because they're personalized. If you're involved in online dating, Match.com, highly algorithmic. They're taking data from people who really do have long-term relationships and get married by using online dating, feed it back into the system and try and pair you in a more accurate fashion so that you have less of a failure rate. That seems reasonable. Facebook, Netflix had a prize for $1 million, which they put out. 2 young academics won that prize. 75% of the choices on Netflix come through the algorithmic push that you get on your menu system, which is personalized. And then the last 2 at the bottom here, there isn't a football club in the world now that's successful that doesn't have 2 or 3 analysts who really look at data and are trying to predict what the opposition are doing, predict what players they should buy, what tactics they should employ. And finally, and amazingly, Jeopardy, one of the most successful quiz programs on the planet, was won by an AI computer built by IBM called Watson. So this is here, folks. You have no choice. It's in the ether. Does this affect you in any way? Well, one of the first things that's popped out of the AI bucket here is automatic essay marking and testing. This is a sort of meme on Facebook, but it's absolutely true. If only I had a few more papers to grade, said no teacher ever, absolutely. I was in UCL a week and a half ago speaking to the professor of pharmacology who was almost in tears because she had 300 essays. Why you're writing an essay in pharmacology, I do not know, neither did she, to mark over Christmas. Every year she gets more students and more essays to mark. It's killing her. It's killing academics. They hate it. What's the solution? Well, the solution is not to have the essay as the only form of assessment. Surely that is damn stupid. But if you do have essays, have a look at this stuff. Let me try and illustrate this with one of my favorite examples here. Now, this question, you might think it's about Pythagoras' theorem. You know, any kid would probably say, okay, 4 squared 16, 3 squared 9, 9 16, 25, square root of 25 is 5. Actually, hardly any kids ever go through that process. They sort of look at this and go, that looks like 5 to me. Or they know a 3, 4, 5. I remember 3, 4, 5. Yeah, that's right, yeah. And I, who taught maths, I have never used Pythagoras' theorem in my entire life. Not once. You know? I was teaching these kids quadratic equations. I've never used them in my entire life. And I'm heavily involved in AI and quite technical things. What on earth are we doing? Shoving mathematics down the throat of every single last child until they choke on the subject. But watch this. Find X. Here it is, says some smart kid at the bottom. You know, now I've employed young people all my life in these tech companies. Who do I want to employ? The kid who's locked themselves up in the bedroom and gets A stars in all his mathematics exams, or the kid who shows some humor, some lateral thinking, who can communicate well, but gets an X in red pen for the question? We don't test for the right skills. We just don't. And we certainly don't do that through endless essays. Okay, the next one, adaptive learning. AI really comes into its own in this one, that's adaptive. And the watchword here is the possibility of doing what no teacher in HE can do, and that's deliver a really personalized learning experience for every single student in the institution, educating everyone uniquely. And by that, you mean not linear content. Remember what I said about the brain? Don't present linear courses. Have a network of learning objects which have dependencies. You don't do multiplication unless you know about addition and subtraction. And every student has a different route through this. This is a bit like having a sat-nav in your car, so that you know where the student starts from, you know where they've got to get to, and people take different routes, and if they tend to go off-piste, which students do, especially in hardcore subjects like maths, you can get them back on track. The software is smart enough. Not only does it know about that student, it aggregates masses of data from other students who've taken the course, and knows where the misconceptions are, the sort of things students get wrong. Okay? And don't think algorithms are stupid things. They do things that in many ways are just as good as the human brain, and sometimes things that are better. In the UK, we have a problem because hardly any girls take A-level physics. And that is actually absolutely proven by research, absolutely due to teacher bias, parental bias, and society's bias in terms of choices of subject at school. Algorithms do not have gender, race, and social background bias. You can build them to ignore that stuff. They can be free of cognitive biases, which almost every human being and therefore every teacher has. They are 24/7, 365 days a year. You can have that personalized experience, personalized reporting back. Remember, this is about technology-enhanced teaching. It's not about replacing teachers. This, in the hands of a good teacher, makes their life easier. It makes them better teachers. And that's why you get measurable drops in failure and dropout. The course my kid's doing an AI degree in Maastricht University in Holland. This year, at the end of the first year, 2/3 of the students failed. 2/3 of those students in that course have wasted a year of their life, thrown out the university. I think that's morally criminal. And there's no attempt made to solve that problem, because some courses are still weeding courses. They used to call that in academia. You know, weeding courses, get rid of the people. We just want PhD students popping out at the end. This is all about scale. And if you want to test adaptive learning, try Duolingo. That's a sort of primitive way. 100 million people are learning foreign languages in Duolingo, and it's free, so give it a bash. The fifth one, going back to what you saw with my sister, is virtual reality. Now, this is going to be big in 2016. That mask I saw you there, that will be $350. And remember this fact about virtual reality. It's not a gadget, it's a medium. It's like film, it's like television, it's like radio, it's like print. It's actually a brand new medium which we'll all be taking part in. And when you put this thing on, you cannot but help think you're there. You saw that, my sister, but that's true of any learning experience as well. You can actually manipulate things. I've been working on a program which is to do with building a nuclear reactor, where you can actually lift the components, screw them together, separate them, actually do things inside a radioactive environment. It's not about mimicking the real world. It's about doing things that are impossible in the real world. Going up to the space station, bottom of the ocean, molecular level, you name it, you can do it in this virtual world. And it's not just the kit tethered with a wire, as you've just seen here. You actually can do this using your phone, so you can put your phone in one of these little cardboard things or plastic things, and it will deliver an app that will allow you to see a 3D world. We could build a model of this room, and you could look around like this, and it would look like this room. And you could walk around this room. You could sit in that seat and see what the stage was from that point of view. There are amazing things about to happen with this medium. And if you think this is Mickey Mouse, Facebook spent $2.3 billion in buying this small company. Remember what I said about their customer base, 1.5 billion people? This is not going to fail. Imagine the possibilities on teaching American cops what it's like to be a black kid being arrested, being stopped and searched every 5 minutes. Imagine what it's like for the black kid to see what it's like from the cop's point of view. Imagine what it's like to teach sexual harassment. Hundreds of millions of dollars are spent on sexual harassment courses, and they don't do jack, because you don't teach sexual harassment from a flip chart. You teach sexual harassment by putting men in a situation where they can experience it for themselves, and that's what you can do with this. I used to do this in Second Life. I had a female avatar. Spend 10 minutes, guy, in Second Life with a female avatar, go to a bar, and you'll learn everything you ever wanted to know about sexual harassment. You ain't going to learn that in a lecture hall or from the flip chart. We've been doing stuff with care workers, minimum wage kids, go in looking after elderly patients with dementia. We built a care home. Interesting little competencies you can teach there. My sister and mother were both nurses, one a psychiatric nurse. When you walk into a room with people with dementia, older people, older residents, you have to say your name. Every nurse knows this. That's a competence. You say your name because you might be a blurred outline, they have poor vision, and they may have forgotten your name, even though they've seen you 100 times. That's a competence you can measure in these systems, and it works well. I have taught physics using this application on VR. You take the kid into a spacesuit, they press a button, they go forward. Okay, that's Newton's third law. Every force has an equal and opposite reaction. You then see what the kid does. They keep going, zzz, and they smash into the space station because Newton's other law says every object will go ad infinitum until another force acts on it. We didn't know this before Newton. It's completely counterintuitive and very, very difficult to teach. You can teach it in 2 minutes in virtual reality because the kid feels it, gets the law. They get it immediately, and they never forget it. High retention. And then you say, why are those guys zooming around at 17,000 miles an hour, floating around inside the space station? What do they answer? Why are they floating? Any answers? Zero gravity. Every kid says that, and it's, of course, the wrong answer, because the gravity in the space station is roughly what it is here on Earth in your seat. They're actually floating because it's constantly falling towards the Earth, and that force is a complete counterbalance to gravity. That's what orbiting is. So gravity is roughly the same, a little bit less, but there's a fascinating way to teach physics. I've given you a few. You can go on here. And the kids just remember that. When you do retention testing weeks afterwards, they just remember this stuff because they believe it, they felt it. Okay? And I think this is right. When Zuckerberg bought it, this was in his press statement. Imagine studying in a classroom of students and teachers all over the world just by putting your goggles on at home. They'll take Facebook online. You won't just be doing that text and photographs thing. You'll be meeting your colleagues for real, doing professional CPD, you name it. Why does this matter in terms of learning theory? Attention, total and utter attention. Learning is an absolute necessary condition for all learning attention, and you get absolute attention in this. Emotional intensity, you can learn by doing something we've largely abandoned. You know, vocational learning has by and large gone from the system in the UK. Every politician is desperately trying to haul apprenticeships back, but it may be too late. The contexts are real, and we know that retention increases by learning in the right context, and you get transfer to the real world, which is a real coup, higher retention, okay? Okay, next one is spaced practice. Now, this guy, Ebbinghaus, German, in 1885, proved that we forget almost everything we learn. You will barely remember anything I've said here today. By lunchtime, it's down to about 50%. By the time you go home, it's down to about 14, possibly 20%. That's a scientific fact. And what do we do about it? Nothing. What do educators do about it? The most famous principle in learning, the forgetting curve, we do absolutely nothing. But you can do things about it. You can actually repeat things over a logarithmic sequence, a sort of Fibonacci sequence going off in the future in reinforced learning. You can do this through mobiles. You can do it through the Apple Watch. It damn well works, and we should be using it now. Students actually do this on their own. They take notes, they reinforce. That's what they cram. They do all that stuff anyway. Now, it's all very well, all that stuff. That sounds great. But how do we get that done in our institutions? You know, it's really tough. And there is no tougher institution than a higher education institution in terms of change management and getting this sort of stuff done. But let me give you some hints. By really looking at just 2 or 3 institutions where I think it does work, and maybe give you some hints on how to make it work. First of all, don't get involved in mosquito projects, which last about 2 or 3 months. They're usually called research projects. They will go nowhere because academics love research projects, but they end up in papers and not in real action in the real world. So you really have to be very wary of mosquito-type projects, which are really individuals within an individual department doing something on their own with a few colleagues. You should be looking at your turtle or tortoise Projects which have longevity. The Open University is a tortoise, a purely online delivery system started in 1969, still going today, the largest university in the UK, 270,000 students. That's a tortoise. That's what we want, always using technology. Okay? And how do you do this? Well, maybe familiar with this, but in business, it's all about crossing this big, scary chasm down here. You can get your innovators in your institution, your early adopters, but really you've got to cross this little bit into the majority, into the student body. This is about students. It's also about teachers, because technology is about technology-enhanced teaching. I'll keep saying that. It's not about just replacing people in any sense. You cannot afford to drop into this chasm, because that will not only waste money, it will destroy the positive attitude you had towards technology in the first place. Let me start with the University of Edinburgh, which I attended all those years ago in the 70s. First off, you need a leader, and the leader there is this guy, Jeff Haywood. Absolutely fantastic. I recommend his talk on YouTube. Just type in Jeff Haywood, you will find it. What do they have as an institution? A strategy, first of all. A leader, a strategy to 2025. Students matter for Jeff. Students really matter. They had a raft of MOOCs, which they gathered data from, which then informed internal strategy on technology. Don't think MOOCs are irrelevant. They are entirely relevant in this area. And you have to move away from those little bijou and niche projects, as he was saying. They now have 50 full online master's courses, and as he says, without technology, it would be undoable. The key word being scale. ASU, they have a leader. Okay? Now, this guy here, Crow, Michael Crow, they call him the Crow, he's written a brilliant book called Designing the New American University. He has grown research, teaching, and access. Doing all three at the same time, juggling those three balls is impossible, and he has done this. First year undergraduate is the concentrated technology push in this institution, because that's where all the dropout is in the US. That's less of a problem in the UK, for example. And the claim they say is that, by and large, HE is a cottage industry. It's individual academics and profs doing their own thing. What you have to do is raise the quality, because all they do is produce stuff on Blackboard, and it's a repository of useless stuff. You know, kids expect high-quality stuff. They go to Blackboard, they get crap. So they are using adaptive learning. Keyword is scale. This one's interesting. University of Hertfordshire in England, working with a Scottish company called the Interactive Design Institute to deliver graphic design degrees, arts degrees, fine art degrees. Who would have thought that was possible? Again, a leader in Judy Glassman. She's the dean of the faculty. Online students outperform the campus-based students year after year. Isn't that amazing? Why? Because in the online system, the graphic students get amazing, detailed feedback. You get something in your virtual studio, the academic feels duty-bound to give you detailed feedback, it comes back to you, it's all archived, far superior to the campus experience. Strong in content, they have multiple intakes across the year, not just that 1 year. If I want to do a course in graphic design, I still have to wait now until next September. How stupid is that? You're still working to the agricultural calendar? You know, we've stopped picking potatoes in October, and they will find your students, they'll market the students because they're good at that stuff, and they'll take the payments. So research technology accelerates entire industries. Let me come to an end here. If you look at computers, transport, medicine, and food, start with food. Absolute amazing trajectory here in terms of output based on technology. Similarly on life expectancy. It goes up and up and up because of science and medicine. Similarly in computer technology, I've shown that surely. And it wasn't that long ago before the fastest thing on the planet was a horse. We now have people in the space station going at 17,000 miles an hour around the Earth. If you think you have a choice here in terms of lowering the cost of higher education, taking what the wonderful things that you have to offer out into poorer students, poorer countries, the refugees who are flooding into Europe as we speak, then you can't exist with the existing hardcore warm body model. It won't work. It doesn't work. We can't export a system to Africa that doesn't even work in our own countries. We have no choice here but to embrace technology. In that sense, resistance is futile. I had a kid in Uganda, in Kampala, last year, who put on that mask. He had cerebral palsy. He couldn't walk. It was an unbelievable experience. This kid went on a bungee jump. He was walking around buildings. It gave him an experience he had never had in his life before. We have a duty. We have an absolute moral duty to take education to these people. but without technology, it won't happen. Thank you very much for listening.